Before humans had philosophy, science, or psychology, they had symbols: the serpent, the eye, the tree, the circle, the mask, the mountain. And somehow, these same images kept appearing in cultures that never met: a serpent in a garden, a serpent in the sky, a serpent wrapped around a staff of healing, a serpent biting its own tail, an eye watching from above, a tree connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld, a mountain where gods speak, a mask that hides the face, but reveals something deeper. At first, this seems like coincidence, but after a while, coincidence begins to look like a language. And the strange thing is this: we still live inside that language. Not only in temples, not only in myths, not only in ancient ruins, but in logos, flags, movies, money, architecture, social media. The modern world likes to believe it has outgrown ancient symbols. But maybe it has only learned to use them faster. Because a symbol is never just an image. A symbol can create trust before you think, desire before you choose, fear before you understand, belonging before you ask why. And that is why symbols matter now more than ever, not because they are old, but because they are still working. Quietly, beautifully, dangerously. Most people look at a symbol and ask, what does it mean? But that may be the wrong question. The deeper question is, what is it doing to me before I even know what it means? Because the ancient world did not use symbols as decoration. It used them as maps. Maps of the soul, maps of power, maps of death, maps of transformation, maps of the invisible forces that move human beings. And perhaps the real difference between the ancient world and the modern one is not that they lived among symbols, and we don't. It is that they knew they were living among them. We often don't. So tonight, we are going to look at the ancient language still controlling your mind, not as superstition, not as fantasy, but as one of the oldest forms of human intelligence, because before we explained the world, we symbolized it. And perhaps, long before we learned how to speak clearly, something deeper in us was already speaking in images. To understand symbols, we have to begin with something simple. The human mind does not experience reality directly. It translates reality. A shadow becomes danger. A light becomes safety. A closed door becomes rejection. An open hand becomes welcome. A crown becomes authority. A mask becomes deception, protection, or transformation. This is why symbols are so powerful. They arrive before explanation, before logic, before the careful voice in your mind says, wait, what does this actually mean? By the time you ask that question, your body may have already responded. You already leaned in or pulled away. You already trusted or doubted. You already felt something. And this is where symbols become dangerous. Not because they are evil, but because they are fast. Ancient people understood this differently than we do. To them, a symbol was not just a representation. It was a bridge between the visible and the invisible. The serpent was not only an animal, it was danger, healing, wisdom, temptation, renewal. It sheds its skin. It disappears into the earth. It frightens us and fascinates us. That is how symbols work. They hold opposites. A serpent can poison, and a serpent can heal. A circle can mean unity or imprisonment. An eye can mean protection or surveillance. Symbols survived because they are alive with contradiction. And the human mind recognizes contradiction because we are made of it. We want freedom, and we want safety. We want truth, and we hide from it. We want to belong, and we want to be unique. We want to change, and we fear becoming someone else. So when ancient cultures created symbols, they were not just drawing pictures, they were giving form to inner conflicts, fear, desire, grief, power, rebirth, chaos. The same symbols return because human life keeps producing the same emotional problems. Every culture has to face death, power, and chaos. So we find tombs, crowns, suns, storms, monsters, and journeys into darkness. Different languages, different gods, different rituals, but the inner architecture is strangely familiar. And this is where the modern person usually makes a mistake. We think symbols belong to the past. But then we open our phones, and suddenly we are inside a world made almost entirely of symbols. A check mark, a notification, a heart icon, a luxury logo, a flag, a number of followers, a white coat, a suit in a courtroom. None of these things are neutral. They tell your brain what to trust, what to desire, what to respect, what to fear, what to envy, what to ignore. That is the practical reason to understand symbols today. Symbolic awareness gives you a pause, and that pause is power. When you feel impressed by a symbol, you can ask, what exactly is being activated in me? When a brand makes something feel sacred, you can ask, what desire is this image borrowing? When social media makes a person look important, you can ask, am I seeing value or symbols of value? This does not make you cynical. It makes you awake. The point is not to reject symbols. You cannot escape them. The point is to stop being unconscious in their presence. A symbol can manipulate you, but it can also orient you. It can remind you who you are. And the same thing happens inside you. You have personal symbols. A street you avoid, a room you remember. A smell brings back a version of yourself you thought was gone. This is how the psyche stores meaning. The mind does not remember only in facts. It remembers in images. It remembers in symbols. So start noticing what keeps returning. What images attract you? What symbols disturb you? What stories do you keep watching? Because attention is rarely random. The images that pull you may be pointing towards something unresolved or something ready to be born. Ancient symbolic knowledge still matters. Symbols train you to think in layers. They teach you that reality is not only what appears on the surface. There are patterns underneath. There are images guiding behavior. There are myths organizing desire. To change a person, you do not only give them information, you give them a new image of who they are becoming. And that is where the next layer begins. If symbols are maps of the mind, then we have to ask something much stranger. Where do these symbols come from? Why does the same image appear in dreams, myths, religions, movies, and memory? And why do some symbols feel older than us, as if they were not invented but discovered? If symbols are maps of the mind, then the next question is unavoidable. Who drew the map? For a long time, the easiest answer was culture. People looked at the serpent, the tree, the mountain, and said, these images spread through trade, migration, stories, and religion. And sometimes that is true. Symbols travel. A mark carved into stone can become a shape in a temple, then a drawing in a book, then a logo on a screen thousands of years later. But that does not solve the whole mystery. Because some symbols do not feel borrowed, they feel as if they rise from the same deep place in different people, under different names. This is where Carl Jung becomes useful. Jung believed that beneath the personal unconscious, the private layer made of memories, wounds, dreams, and forgotten experiences, there is something deeper. A collective unconscious, not a library of stories, but a structure of the psyche, where certain patterns keep appearing because human beings keep facing the same situations: birth, death, mother, father, danger, desire, shadow, transformation, the unknown, the journey away from home, the return changed. Jung called these deep patterns archetypes. An archetype is not a character in the ordinary sense. It is more like a force that takes shape through images. The hero, the great mother, the shadow, the trickster, the monster, the guide. These figures appear in myths, dreams, religions, stories, and films because they give human experience a body. They allow something invisible to become visible. This is why a myth can feel true even when you know it did not literally happen. Because myth is not always trying to describe history. Sometimes it is describing psychology. A dragon outside the village may be a monster in a story, but it may also be fear, chaos, and the unknown part of life that must be faced. This is the practical value of symbolic thinking. It helps you stop asking only, "Is this real?" and begin asking, "What human truth is this image carrying?" That question changes everything. Stories become deeper, dreams become less random, movies become more revealing, even your own reactions become clues. Why does one image comfort you while another disturbs you? Why do certain characters stay with you for years? The answer may not be entertainment, it may be recognition. Something in you recognizes the pattern, and modern life understands this very well. A brand does not simply sell a product, it sells an archetype. The rebel, the visionary, the caretaker, the explorer, the elite, the innocent, the outsider. When you buy the thing, you are often buying the image of a self, the self you want to become, the self others see. This is why symbolic intelligence is not an ancient hobby. It is a modern survival skill. Once you understand archetypes, you become harder to hypnotize by surfaces. You can look at an advertisement and ask, "Which version of me is this trying to awaken?" You can watch a public figure and ask, "Which archetype are they performing? The protector, the savior, the rebel, the victim, the wise elder, the chosen one?" When you ask that, you do not become cold. You become precise. You begin to see the stage, the costume, and the emotional script offered to the crowd. This also applies inwardly. Maybe you are trying to be the hero, so you keep choosing struggle. Maybe the rebel in you rejects every structure, even the ones that could help you grow. These are not labels to trap yourself. They are mirrors. They help you see which inner pattern has taken the throne. The danger is not having archetypes. The danger is being possessed by one without knowing it. This is where ancient symbolic knowledge becomes practical. It helps you notice the myth you are living. A myth is not just an old story about gods. It tells you what matters, what is dangerous, and who you are allowed to become. The symbols did not disappear. The temples changed location. Now they are in cinema, in advertising, in social media, in the glowing rectangle we carry in our hands. Maybe modern people are more mythological than ancient people because we no longer know which myths are moving us. We think we are choosing, but often, an image has chosen us first. Behind every symbol there is a question. Who is using it? What emotion is it organizing? What identity is it offering? And what part of me is answering yes? That is the next door. Symbols do not only live inside myths and dreams. They live inside power. Symbols do not only live inside myths and dreams, they live inside power. Every society has symbols that teach people where to look, whom to obey, what to fear, and what to respect. A throne is not just a chair. A crown is not just metal. A flag is not just fabric. A uniform is not just clothing. These things do something to the room. They change posture. They organize emotion. They make one person appear larger than another. And often, they work before anyone says a word. Think about a courtroom, the judge's seat, the formal robes, the silence, the ritual of standing. All of it is symbolic architecture. It tells the body, this is not a normal room. Something serious is happening here. Power rarely presents itself as raw force. That would be too obvious. Power prefers symbols, because symbols make power feel natural. A building with columns borrows the memory of empires. A white coat carries the weight of science and trust. A logo above a glass tower says, this institution is solid, modern, untouchable. Societies need symbols to coordinate meaning. But symbols can also hide the mechanism. They can make human decisions look like eternal truth. They can make a brand feel like a tribe. They can make status look like virtue. They can make obedience feel like identity. This is where symbolic literacy becomes useful in ordinary life. When you walk into a place, ask yourself, what is this space trying to make me feel? Small, important, safe, inferior, chosen? Behind every designed environment, there is an emotional instruction. A luxury store uses silence and scarcity to make objects feel almost sacred. A social platform uses icons, numbers, badges, and notifications to turn attention into a game of belonging. None of this requires a conspiracy. It only requires an understanding of the human nervous system. We move towards symbols of approval. We avoid symbols of exclusion. We copy symbols of status. We defend symbols of belonging. This is why people can argue over a flag, a statue, a logo, a book, a piece of clothing, or a word. From the outside, it may look irrational, but symbolically, people are not fighting over the object. They are fighting over the world the object represents. The modern advantage is not to become detached from this. It is to become more conscious, because the person who cannot read symbols becomes easier to move, moved by fear, moved by prestige, moved by outrage, moved by belonging, moved by the promise of becoming someone else. But the person who can read symbols gains a moment of freedom, a small space between image and reaction. In that space, you can ask better questions. Is this symbol helping me remember my values? Or is it borrowing my values to sell me something? Is this image calling me upward or pulling me into comparison? These questions matter because modern manipulation rarely feels like manipulation. It feels like taste. It feels like preference. It feels like common sense. But often what we call common sense is a symbol system we inherited without noticing. Ancient people were not naive for using ritual, masks, sacred objects, and ceremonies. They knew the human being needed images. They knew an invisible transition needed a visible form. A birth, a death, a marriage, an initiation. These moments are too large for ordinary language, so cultures wrapped them in symbols. Modern life removed many of these rituals, but it did not remove the need. So the need returns elsewhere. Brands, fandoms, political movements, online identities. We still create masks. We simply call them profiles. We still create tribes. We simply call them audiences. When a culture loses conscious symbols, unconscious symbols take over. When people no longer know what they worship, they often worship whatever is most visible. Attention becomes sacred. Status becomes salvation. Influence becomes priesthood. The algorithm becomes oracle. This is not a reason to hate the modern world. It is a reason to see it clearly. Once you see the symbols, you can choose your relationship with them. A notebook can become a symbol of discipline. A candle can become a threshold into silence. A ring can remind you of a promise. The symbol does not need to be ancient to be powerful. It needs to be charged with meaning. And this is why the next question matters. If symbols can organize power in society and attention in the individual, can they also organize transformation? Can a symbol actually change the way a person lives? The ancient world believed it could. And modern psychology may be closer to that belief than we think. If symbols can organize power in society and attention in the individual, can they also organize transformation? The ancient world believed they could. This is why transformation was rarely treated as a private thought. It was made visible. A child became an adult through a ritual. A stranger became part of a tribe through a mark, a garment, a ceremony. A person in mourning wore black. A king received a crown. The symbol told the world, something has changed. But more importantly, it told the person, you are no longer exactly who you were. Modern people often try to change without symbols. We try to think our way into a new life. We read the book. We make the plan. We promise ourselves that this time will be different. But often, the old self returns because the body never received the message that a threshold had been crossed. This is one reason rituals mattered. A ritual is not magic in the childish sense. It is attention shaped into form. It tells the mind, this moment is different from ordinary time. The candle, the doorway, the ring, the written vow, the silence before speaking. All of these create a border, before and after, old and new. If you want to change a habit, your mind needs more than information. It needs a repeated image of the person you are becoming. That image can become a symbol. A notebook can mean discipline. Running shoes can mean devotion. A clean table can mean mental clarity. The object itself is not the point. The meaning you attach to it is the point. This is how symbols become anchors. They hold a decision when your mood disappears. Because moods are unstable, symbols endure. And this is where ancient knowledge becomes deeply modern. We live in a time of endless information, but very little initiation. We are constantly updated, but rarely transformed. The ancient mind understood that the soul needs thresholds. You become different when a new image of yourself becomes stronger than the old one. This is why symbols can heal, but also trap. A person can carry the symbol of failure for years. One rejection becomes proof. One mistake becomes identity. One painful memory becomes a private emblem that says, this is who I am. And once a wound becomes a symbol, it appears in the background of choices. You avoid the opportunity. You distrust the compliment. You sabotage the door before anyone can close it. Not because you are weak, because the old symbol is still alive. So symbolic intelligence asks, what images are ruling my life? What do I treat as proof? What do I treat as warning? What do I keep obeying without naming it? This is uncomfortable work, but it is also liberating. Because once a symbol becomes conscious, you can begin to change your relationship with it. The door that once meant rejection can become discernment. The scar that meant shame can become survival. The silence that meant abandonment can become space. The mountain that meant impossibility can become the place where the next version of you is formed. This is not positive thinking. It is symbolic reframing. You are not pretending the past did not happen. You are changing the image through which the past continues to speak. Ancient stories did this all the time. The forest begins as danger. After the ordeal, it becomes initiation. The cave begins as darkness. Later, it becomes the womb of transformation. The monster begins as threat. After it is faced, it becomes guardian of the treasure. The meaning changes because the person changes. This is why dreams often speak in symbols. They do not explain your anxiety in clean sentences. They show houses with hidden rooms, bridges collapsing, water rising, locked doors. The image arrives first. The explanation comes later. Sometimes the dream is not asking to be solved like a puzzle. It is asking to be listened to like a poem. The modern mind wants definitions, but symbolic thinking asks for relationship. Stay with the image. Notice what it does to you. Notice where it appears in your life. That is how you begin to read the invisible. Once you can read your own symbols, you become less dependent on the symbols handed to you by the outside world. You stop mistaking visibility for meaning. You stop confusing performance with identity. You begin to choose your own signs and images of becoming. A symbol does not merely describe reality, it can train the soul to enter a new one. But if symbols can transform a person, they can also transform a culture. And that brings us to something even more unsettling. The symbols that guide your inner life may not have been chosen by you at all. If the symbols that guide your inner life may not have been chosen by you, then the next question becomes uncomfortable. Who chose them? Every age has its sacred images. The ancient world had temples, gods, stars, crowns, altars, and masks. The modern world has logos, screens, celebrity faces, slogans, profile pictures, and numbers that measure attention. We change the surface, but not the mechanism. Human beings still gather around images. We still look for signs that tell us what matters. We still ask symbols to give us identity. Only now, many of those symbols are designed by people who understand attention better than we understand ourselves. A symbol can unite. It can organize hope. But it can also bypass thought and go straight into loyalty. Modern culture is full of images that do not simply inform you. They recruit you. They ask you to join a feeling before you understand the idea. A brand does this. A movement does this. A campaign does this. A trend does this. The image arrives first. The explanation comes later. By the time the explanation comes, you may already feel that the symbol is part of you. This is why people defend symbols so intensely. They are not only defending fabric, colours, icons, or words, they are defending a piece of borrowed identity. To insult the symbol feels like an insult to the self. This is where symbolic knowledge becomes protection. Not protection from meaning. Protection from unconscious meaning. The danger is not that symbols influence us. They always have. The danger is when we do not know which symbols we are serving. Ask yourself a simple question. What images make you feel behind? What images make you feel successful? What images make you feel safe? What images make you feel invisible? Much of your emotional life may be organized visually. A house means security. A body type means desirability. A blue check mark means importance. A relationship picture means happiness. None of these meanings are fixed by nature. They were taught, repeated, reinforced. And eventually we stop seeing them as symbols. We call them reality. That is when they become most powerful. A symbol controls best when it no longer looks like a symbol. It becomes obvious, normal, natural, the way things are. This is why ancient symbolic systems are worth studying today. They slow the world down. They remind us that meaning is constructed, inherited, performed, and repeated. They teach us to look twice. When you study the serpent, the crown, the eye, the mask, the tree, the mountain, You are not escaping into the past. You are training perception. And once you see that in ancient myths, you can start seeing it in modern life. You can look at a commercial and notice the savior archetype. You can look at social media and notice the altar. The goal is not paranoia. The goal is discernment. Paranoia says, everything is trying to control me. Discernment says, everything is communicating with me, and I can learn to read it. Symbolic intelligence should not make you afraid of images. It should make you responsible in their presence. This is where you can apply the knowledge immediately. Look at your room. Look at your phone screen. Look at your clothes. Look at the accounts you follow. Ask yourself, what identity are these symbols rehearsing in me every day? Are they making me more conscious, more courageous, more honest? Or are they making me restless, envious, fragmented, and easy to move? Your environment is not neutral. It is a symbolic field. Every repeated image becomes a small instruction. And over time, those instructions become a self. This is why the ancients placed symbols carefully. At thresholds, on temples, on graves, on clothing, around rituals. They understood that what surrounds the human being enters the human being. Modern people know this too. We just call it branding. But there is a deeper possibility. You can choose symbols that strengthen the person you are becoming. Not for performance, not to impress anyone, but to remember. A single object on your desk can remind you of discipline. A written phrase can become a doorway back to your values. This is ancient knowledge in modern form. Choose the symbols that choose you back. But even this is not the deepest layer. Beneath social symbols, personal symbols, and cultural symbols, there is one place where the symbolic mind still speaks with almost no censorship: dreams. And dreams may be the last ancient temple most modern people still enter every night, without knowing it. Dreams may be the last ancient temple most modern people still enter every night without knowing it. You close your eyes, the rational world dissolves, and the mind begins speaking in images again. A house with endless rooms, a train you cannot catch, water rising through the floor, a door you know you should not open. No lecture, no explanation, just symbols. And when you wake up, the modern mind says, that was random. But was it? Maybe some dreams are only fragments. A tired brain sorting impressions after a long day. But sometimes, an image stays. It follows you into the morning. You do not know what it means, but you know it meant something. That is the symbolic mind at work. It does not speak like a professor. It speaks like a poet. It places one image beside another and waits for you to feel the connection. This is why ancient cultures paid attention to dreams, not because every dream was prophecy, but because dreams revealed what waking life tried to hide. A dream could show fear before the ego admitted fear. It could show desire before the mouth confessed desire. It could show a conflict before the person had words for it. In that sense, dreams are not an escape from reality. They are reality speaking in another language. And if you have stayed with me this far, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and keep walking with us. Because what we explore here is not just old mythology or strange symbols from the past. It is the hidden architecture of the human mind, the patterns beneath culture, the images beneath behavior, the ancient mirrors still reflecting us back to ourselves. And now, let's return to the dream. A symbol is not useful because it gives you a quick answer. It is useful because it gives you a deeper question. If you dream of a house, the shallow mind asks, what does a house mean? But the symbolic mind asks, Was I inside or outside? Was there a hidden room? Did I feel safe, trapped, watched, invited? The symbol is not a code to break. It is a relationship to enter. That is also how we should read ancient symbols. The serpent does not mean one thing. The tree does not mean one thing. The eye does not mean one thing. Their meaning depends on the story, the feeling, the person, the culture, and the transformation being asked for. Information wants speed. Symbols ask for attention. Information says, consume this. A symbol says, stay here a little longer. And that may be why modern life makes symbolic thinking difficult. We scroll too fast to let images deepen. We see thousands of symbols every day but rarely stay with any of them long enough to understand what they are doing to us. The image flashes, the emotion fires, the next image arrives, and slowly, attention becomes fragmented. But symbols require the opposite. They ask you to slow down enough to notice your own response. This is the practical exercise. For one day, do not ask only what you see. Ask what each image is asking from you. The notification asks for urgency. The mirror asks for judgment. The logo asks for desire. The flag asks for loyalty. The profile picture asks for comparison. The open notebook asks for return. The empty chair asks for absence. The candle asks for silence. Suddenly, the world becomes readable again. Not simple, readable. And when the world becomes readable, you become less passive inside it. You notice which symbols drain you and which symbols strengthen you. You notice which images make you smaller and which ones call you back to yourself. This is where symbols become self-knowledge. Not because they explain everything, but because they reveal where your attention is emotionally attached. A person can say they want freedom, but keep worshipping symbols of approval. A person can say they want peace, but keep surrounding themselves with images of urgency. A person can say they want depth, but keep feeding the mind with symbols of surface. The life follows the altar, and every life has altars. Some are conscious, some are not. Maybe the most important modern question is not, what do I believe? Maybe it is, what do I keep placing my attention before? Because whatever receives your repeated attention begins to shape your inner world. The ancients understood that images are not empty. They train perception. They educate desire. They make certain futures easier to imagine, and others almost impossible. When you choose what to watch, what to wear, what to repeat, what to admire, what to keep returning to, you are not only decorating your life, you are participating in the formation of your mind. And this brings us to the final layer. If symbols can shape attention, identity, dreams, desire, and culture, then the question is no longer whether symbols are real. The question is whether you are reading them consciously or being read by them. If the question is whether you are reading symbols consciously or being read by them, the answer begins in a very ordinary place. It begins with attention, because attention is the gate. Whatever holds your attention long enough begins to shape your imagination, and whatever shapes your imagination begins to shape what you believe is possible. This is why symbols matter. They do not only represent meaning, they train the mind to return to certain meanings again and again. A flag can make millions feel like one body. A logo can make an object feel like a promise. A ring can hold a vow when emotion is tired. A symbol is a small thing that carries something too large to hold. Ancient people surrounded the most important moments of life with symbols: birth, death, marriage, initiation, return, renewal. They knew human beings need forms for the invisible. We still do. Only now, many of our forms arrive through screens. Images tell us what beauty is. Numbers tell us what value is. Trends tell us what belonging is. Brands tell us what identity is. And because this happens every day very fast, we forget that we are being shaped, not by one image, but by repetition. One symbol may pass through you and disappear, but a repeated symbol becomes an atmosphere. And an atmosphere, over time, becomes a world. This is why the ancient language is still controlling your mind. Not because someone hid it in a secret book, but because the human mind never stopped being symbolic. We are not machines that respond only to facts. We are creatures of image, memory, fear, desire, and meaning. We do not simply ask, what is true? We ask, where do I belong? Who am I becoming? What must I fear? These are symbolic questions, and the modern world answers them constantly. Sometimes beautifully, sometimes brutally, sometimes without your permission. The goal is not to escape symbols. That would be impossible. The goal is to become conscious enough to choose which symbols deserve your devotion. Look at what you keep returning to. The images, the stories, the people, the objects, the places, the rituals. Ask what they are making more alive in you. Some symbols make you anxious, some make you smaller, some keep you trapped in comparison, but some symbols call you back. A book on a table, a quiet room, a photograph of someone who believed in you. A symbol does not need to be grand. It needs to be true. Maybe this is what the ancient world can still teach us. Not to believe every old image blindly. Not to turn the past into decoration, but to understand that symbols are tools of perception. They reveal what a culture worships. They reveal what a person fears. The serpent was never only a serpent. The eye was never only an eye. The tree was never only a tree. The mask was never only a mask. They were ways of speaking about transformation, awareness, life, death, deception, power, protection, and the hidden parts of being human. And the same is true now. The checkmark is not only a checkmark. The profile is not only a profile. The screen is not only a screen. The number is not only a number. Each one carries a story about value. Each one asks for a response. Each one quietly says, "This matters." The question is whether you agree. That is where freedom begins, not in rejecting every symbol, but in noticing the moment before obedience, the small pause before you believe, the breath before you compare, the space before you follow. In that space, you can ask, is this image making me more awake or more automatic? Is it calling me toward depth or pulling me toward performance? This is the advantage of symbolic knowledge in the modern age. It gives you a second sight, not supernatural, human. It lets you see that the world is not only made of objects, but of meanings attached to objects. Before philosophy, science, and psychology, we had symbols. And after all our progress, we still do. They are in our cities, our dreams, our brands, our rituals, our memories, our fears. They are in the stories we tell about the world, and in the stories we tell about ourselves. So the next time you see a symbol, do not rush to define it. Pause. Notice what it awakens. Notice what it asks from you. Notice what part of you answers. Because maybe the deepest symbols are not the ones carved into ancient stone. Maybe they are the ones that quietly carve themselves into us. If this video gave you a new way to see the world, subscribe to the channel. Share it with 5 people who would understand this kind of conversation. And leave a sincere comment below. Tell me which symbol has been following you lately. And tell me what topic you want us to open next. Because once you begin to read the language of symbols, the world does not become less mysterious. It becomes more honest.